Social and trade union movements in Bolivia continue mobilizations as part of an indefinite general strike following the postponement of elections. US presidential hopeful Joe Biden on Tuesday named Kamala Harris, a black senator from California, as his running mate for vice president. Thousands marched in Lebanon's capital on Tuesday to pay tribute to the victims of the devastating blast that took place in Beirut last week. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Bolivia, where social and trade union movements continue mobilizations as part of a general strike following the postponement of general elections. The protests, including marches, rallies and roadblocks, have been ongoing for 9 days. Protesters are calling for the resignation of the de facto regime of Janine Áñez, while rejecting the threats issued by the authorities to clear them from the streets. The movement is calling for the elections to be held as previously agreed on September 6, after the Electoral Tribunal postponed the vote to October 16th. The move was seen as yet another attempt by the de facto government to cling on to power.
We are coming to block roads. They don't give us anything here. This de facto government repressed us last night. It has launched tear gas, together with the motorcycle gangs. What does this woman want? We have already told her, the entire Bolivian people, to leave, to step down. She doesn't resign, but has bought tear gas, but nothing to economize Bolivia. She just wants to steal our lithium. There is no longer any gas. What will become of us? If she had even a little shame, she would step down. She makes Bolivia look bad. We don't want her. We want to denounce from El Alto to the whole world that they are starving us to death, that the government minister threatened us with enough bullets for 6 months. He said that he has purchased tear gas, pellets, military weapons in order to repress the Bolivian people for 6 months. There are no medical supplies, no biosecurity materials, no ventilators. They are stealing the money for the ventilators. We are blocking roads because we want free education for our children. We want health services for our family. We want stability. We want work in our country.
Analysts have warned that Colombian President Iván Duque's position on the case against Senator and former President Álvaro Uribe has overstepped the limits of his executive powers. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar has the story.
The Supreme Court order of putting Uribe under house arrest has sparked criticism from the executive and deepens the polarization of the already divided Colombian society.
I am calling for a great national reflection. What am I asking for? Let's forget about this specific case. Let's talk about the citizens' rights to the presumption of innocence. And this presumption of innocence should guarantee the right to defend himself while being free. I have always believed this.
Political activists consider Duque's position is not part of his role. They believe that it becomes a pressure on the judges of the Supreme Court of Justice, and they will take legal actions ahead of any potential bias on this case.
President Duque has been making statements that limits the judiciary independence. He instructs the court on how it should act, what should be the purpose of its actions, and that interference, because it is indeed an interference, of the independence of the powers of the judiciary violates the balance among the public powers. We believe this should have an international scope, so that the world knows that a violation of a fundamental principle of the rule of law is happening in Colombia. That is why we are considering what will be the international organization that we will involve in this matter in the following days.
Analysts point out that the executive and the official Democratic Center Party's stance seeks to impose a media and political narrative in which Uribe is seen as an alleged victim.
Turning the court's decision into a media campaign about the scope of its decisions may take into account a comprehensive research process, and in which there is no evidence of any lack of impartiality, constitutes an inadmissible aggression to the rule of law. What they are trying to do is to impose an agenda in which Uribe is a victim of political persecution. They want to question the judiciary branch, the standing of the court, because they know, they are aware of the fact that they will accomplish nothing if they do follow the rule of law, and that is why they are betting all to the political side of this case.
In this context, the defense of Senator Uribe has requested to know more of the case file, although analysts claim that this is not possible because what they want is to contaminate the action of the judges with undue pressures or with undue procedures outside the Constitution. They strongly believe that this constitutes a mechanism to attack the authority of the Supreme Court of Justice.
In Trinidad and Tobago, the ruling People's National Movement declared victory in the general elections held on Monday. 1.1 million citizens were eligible to cast their vote in the 41 constituencies of the country in an extended voting process due to COVID-19 safety measures. Preliminary results show the ruling People's National Movement won 22 of the 41 electoral seats, while the opposition United National Congress, led by former Prime Minister Kamala Harris, won 19 seats. Prime Minister Keith Rowley has called on supporters not to take to the streets to celebrate the victory due to the risk posed by the coronavirus. On Tuesday, Cuban authorities provided an update on the epidemiological situation surrounding the novel coronavirus.
As a result of the analysis of these 4,054 samples, 47 people tested positive for COVID-19 in our country yesterday. Following this pattern of testing and diagnosis, 305,652 samples have been tested, and 3,093 people have been diagnosed with the disease.
And the National Director of Epidemiology at the Cuban Ministry of Public Health made reference to the number of people who have recovered from COVID-19.
Yesterday, there were 12 discharges. This number is not favorable compared to the number of cases admitted yesterday. These 12 discharges sum a total of 2,472 patients who have recovered from the disease. We are talking about 80% of confirmed cases.
And Dr. Duran also noted that the coronavirus mortality rate in Cuba has fallen to 2.84%.
We do not have to regret the death of any person with the disease for 7 days. The death toll stands at 88 in our country. That makes the mortality rate in Cuba 2.84%. Note that with this behavior we have been decreasing from 3 to 2.84%.
And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. US presidential hopeful Joe Biden on Tuesday named Kamala Harris, a black senator from California, as his running mate for vice president. Biden announced the decision on Twitter, describing Harris as a fearless fighter for the little guy and one of the country's finest public servants. The move capped a months-long search for a Democratic partner to challenge President Donald Trump in November. Biden's team reported that the two Democrats will deliver remarks on Wednesday in Wilmington, Delaware, as they kick off their election campaign. Harris is the first African-American and South Asian-American woman to be chosen as the running mate of a major US party's presidential candidate. And following the announcement of her selection, Senator Kamala Harris tweeted that she was honored to join Biden as the Democratic Party's nominee for vice president, adding she would do what it takes to secure a victory. Harris, aged 55, was elected to the Senate in 2016 after serving as California's Attorney General. She had hoped to stand against Biden for the Democratic presidential nomination, but withdrew from the race before voting began as she struggled to raise the money for her campaign. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on Tuesday that Russia has registered the world's first vaccine against the novel coronavirus. Putin said the vaccine is effective and provides immunity against the deadly virus, which has spread globally. So far, more than 20 countries have requested 1 billion doses of the vaccine. Meanwhile, Putin insisted that vaccination in Russia should only be carried out on a voluntary basis. He also revealed that one of his daughters has already been vaccinated. With over 700,000 deaths attributed to the pandemic and over 20 million cases confirmed worldwide, a vaccine is urgently required. According to reports, the Russian vaccine will be distributed internationally by January 2021.
As far as I know, this morning, for the first time in the world, a vaccine against the new coronavirus was registered, and it is quite effective. It gives sustainable immunity. I know this very well too, because one of my daughters had herself such a vaccination. In this sense, she took part in the experiment. What counts most is for us to be able to ensure the unconditional safety of the use of this vaccine and its efficiency in the future. I hope that this will be accomplished.
Mexico's Foreign Secretary stated on Tuesday that the government has agreements with 3 companies to carry out advanced clinical trials for potential COVID-19 vaccines in Mexico this fall.
Regarding the vaccine for COVID-19, I can inform you of good news today. We have an understanding with 3 different companies, one from the United States, 2 from China. It's called understanding because it's a memoranda of understanding. The objective is that what is called Phase 3 of the clinical protocol of these vaccines or possible vaccines is carried out in Mexico. This is very good news because there are 3 Phase 3 protocols for every advanced projects, which is what President López Obrador is concerned about, that we have it, a vaccine for COVID-19 on time.
The Pan American Health Organization has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic increases the risk of death from mosquito-borne diseases, which are widespread in the region, since it has limited the response capacity of health services.
Diseases spread by mosquitoes are widespread in our region. And since our collective ability to monitor viruses and pathogens has also been impacted by the pandemic, we are also concerned about falling behind on these diseases. We've also seen that reporting of mosquito-borne diseases like malaria is down more than 40%. And there has been also an observed reduction in the number of people getting tested. So we know that this data really do not tell the full story.
The Turkish government announced that it will continue gas exploration in disputed waters in the eastern Mediterranean this Tuesday and warned that it will defend Turkey's maritime rights without concessions. Tensions between Turkey and Greece rose this Monday over the resumption of Turkish gas exploration between its southern coast in Antalya province and the disputed territory of Cyprus. Greek authorities have urged Turkey to cease exploration in areas it considers to be within its jurisdiction and accused the Turkish government of undermining peace and security in the region. Ankara claims that a large area of the eastern Mediterranean belongs to Turkey's exclusive economic zone, arguing that the Greek islands cannot serve as a basis for delimiting the Greek exclusive economic zone, a position challenged by Athens and the European Union. And Greece's foreign minister has called for an emergency meeting of the European Union's Foreign Affairs Council as Turkey vowed to press ahead with energy exploration in the eastern Mediterranean Sea.
The request comes at a time when there is a clear Turkish threat to peace and security in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece and Cyprus, despite our country's commitment to dialogue on the basis of the rules of international law and the law of the sea, a commitment which we are repeating now, Turkey has decided to indulge in its familiar delinquency. It proved once again that its statements about readiness for dialogue were insincere and misleading.
According to the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Singapore's GDP fell by a record 13.2% year-on-year in the second quarter of 2020. Low economic performance in the first half of the year had prompted the Ministry of Trade and Industry to estimate a fall of 12.6%. But the revised government data revealed a lengthy path to recovery as the coronavirus pandemic has dealt a major blow to Asia's trade-reliant economies. Singapore has been hit hard by the virus, remaining under lockdown for most of the second quarter to curb its spread. The government said it now expects GDP to contract by between 5% and 7% over the whole of 2020 versus its previous forecast for a 4% to 7% decline. The transport and tourism hub is facing the biggest downturn in its history. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Thousands marched in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, on Tuesday to pay tribute to the victims of the devastating blast that took place last week. According to local authorities, the blasts killed over 200 people and injured some 7,000, while more than 300,000 residents were made homeless. A moment of silence was observed at 3:09 p.m. local time this Tuesday to pay tribute to the victims, while hundreds of protesters once again stormed the Parliament building, chanting slogans against the political elite. Although Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab announced his government's resignation on Monday, many Lebanese are demanding the formation of an independent cabinet not supported by any of the traditional political parties, accused of mismanaging the country's affairs.
We are still in shock, just like on the day it happened. We still can't believe what happened. We came today to light a candle and lay a flower to pay tribute to those who died here. Hopefully this will serve as a lesson to the state, for it to take its responsibilities for once in his life. It's a crime that people in the prime of their lives died because of a state that does not take its responsibilities, a state that lies, a criminal state that refuses to live. Every day that passes and this state still exists, we feel just how much we are being wrong, how broken we are. They keep committing crimes against us, and we're still standing, and there's nothing we can do. All I want to say today is that inside of me and inside of many young people here, there is anger, sadness, and hatred.
And as fury over the blast in Beirut and the ongoing economic crisis in Lebanon grows, President Michel Aoun asked the government to stay in on a caretaker capacity until a new cabinet is formed. Several reports have emerged revealing that authorities were warned about the storage of explosive materials in Beirut's port before last week's deadly explosion. As the recovery efforts continued, authorities announced that the blast was fueled by more than 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate that had been stored at the port for several years. And a memorial was held in Beirut for the victims of the massive explosion on this Tuesday. The bells of the St. George Maronite Church rang out, while the Mohammed Al-Amin Mosque issued a call to prayer exactly 1 week after the blasts. Crowds gathered in the port area to pay their respects as the names of the victims were displayed and read out as part of the ceremony. Egyptians headed to the polls this Tuesday in the first of 2 days of voting to elect a new Senate. Electoral authorities reported that a total of 17,500 polling stations have been set up across the country. Over 63 million people are eligible to vote. The previous upper house of the Egyptian parliament was abolished in a constitution of 2014, but the new Senate Council was established as part of constitutional amendments approved in a referendum last year. The 300-seat council, unlike the House of Representatives, has no legislative powers and will have a mainly advisory role. 1/3 of the seats will be appointed by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Palestinians rallied in the West Bank city of Ramallah on Tuesday, calling for the European Union to pressure Israel to free a local leader of the global campaign to boycott Israel. Mahmoud Naraja, coordinator of the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement in the occupied Palestinian territories, was arrested at his home in Ramallah on July 30th. Several human rights groups, including Amnesty International, have called for his release. More than 100 protesters gathered outside the German delegation office in Ramallah, urging the country, which currently holds the European body's rotating presidency, to pressure Israel on this matter. Malians took to the streets in the capital Bamako on Tuesday despite rainfall and pleas from mediators to stay home to demand the resignation of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The protesters, cited as a few thousand, assembled in a central square carrying placards bearing anti-government slogans. The gathering marks the first time the opposition June 5th movement has staged a protest since July 21st, when it declared a temporary truce in the ongoing mobilizations to push President Keïta out. South Africa has now reported a total of nearly 564,000 COVID-19 cases. According to Health Minister Zwelithini Mkhize, over 3,700 new cases and 213 COVID-19 deaths were reported in the last 24 hours. The death toll now stands at 10,621. However, President Cyril Ramaphosa has noted that the national mortality rate remains at 1.6%, which is significantly lower than the global average. The French Prime Minister has vowed that justice will be served after the murders of 6 young French aid workers, as well as their driver and local guide, in an attack in Niger on Sunday.
The victims are civilians, young people engaged in humanitarian work, who were therefore working in the service of others, in a spirit of cooperation and closeness to the people of this country. I, therefore, extend my particular heartfelt condolences to their families, loved ones and colleagues. France, as the President of the Republic has said, will ensure that this heinous crime against our compatriots does not go unpunished.
Meanwhile, Nigerians have reacted to the killings in what was considered one of the safer parts of the country.
In light of the horror of the crime that has been committed, in light of the youth of those who were victims for the most part, I really think that the Nigerian authorities, together with the French and American authorities, must redouble their efforts to find the culprits and bring them to justice. It is such a repugnant crime. We urge the authorities to do everything they can to get their hands on these highwaymen, to prevent them from committing more murders tomorrow. We could be the next targets. Young foreigners have been killed. May God help the authorities catch them and punish them.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesoenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Teleso English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.